Okay, so body systems part 2, diet and digestion. Firstly, we have a look at the health triangle, the three aspects of the health triangle, all equally as important as each other, with often lots of overlap between them. There's physical, mental and social health that you have to consider. Looking at food, we need food for energy, growth and repair, and there are different types of foods. Carbohydrates, made of carbon, hydrogen and oxygen as elements. The subunits are sugars, glucose in the case of starch, and they're needed for energy. Fats are made of the same elements, carbon, hydrogen and oxygen, but the subunits are fatty acids and glycerol, and the fats of course provide an energy store. Proteins, made of carbon, hydrogen, oxygen again, but also nitrogen. The subunits are amino acids and they're needed for growth and repair. We can identify different food types with food tests. Firstly, starch, the carbohydrate, the complex carbohydrate can be identified with iodine, which turns blue-black in the presence of starch. Sugar can be identified with Benedict's solution, which turns from blue to orange if there's sugar present. Protein, blue biuret solution, turns lilac. And fats can be shown with the simple filter paper test, where you rub the foodstuff in and it becomes translucent, allowing light to pass through it. In animals, there are different feeding types. Herbivores eat plants, for example horses and cows. Carnivores eat other animals, of course, like the fox, like a tiger, amongst many others. And omnivores eat both plants and other animals, such as humans, pigs and bears. There are different types of teeth in the mouth. The incisors are for biting food. Canines are for ripping and tearing food. There's one set of canines, one pair of canines in each jaw, and two pairs of incisors in each jaw. Two pairs of premolars, and three pairs in the adult set of molars, the final set being the wisdom teeth, and molars of course are for chewing and grinding food to enable you to swallow it. In a balanced diet, a healthy combination, carbohydrates, proteins and fats, but also vitamins and minerals, and of course fiber and plenty of water. If we have a look at some deficiency diseases, vitamin C, a lack of vitamin C leads to scurvy. A lack of vitamin D, which is needed for healthy bones and teeth, that can cause rickets, especially in developing children. Deficiency in iron can cause anemia, a low red blood cell count, because iron is needed for hemoglobin in red blood cells. And a lack of folic acid during pregnancy can lead to the protrusion of the lower part of the spinal cord from the fetus, and that's called spina bifida. Digestion itself, breakdown of large insoluble food particles into small soluble food particles, and digestion allows food particles to be absorbed into the bloodstream. So imagine a large insoluble food molecule here gets broken down by enzymes ultimately into small soluble food molecules that are then able to be absorbed into the bloodstream. In terms of actual breakdown of food, firstly there's mechanical breakdown which occurs in the mouth by the action of the teeth chewing and by the churning of food in the stomach. But the chemical breakdown of food, turning the food into those small soluble food molecules that get absorbed into the bloodstream, that occurs by the action of enzymes, and that's chemical breakdown. If we have a look at the digestion of some of these food groups, digestion of carbohydrates, starch for example is broken down into sugar, and amylase is a carbohydrase enzyme which breaks down carbohydrate. There's a bit of starch molecule. Amylase comes along and breaks the bonds in between those different glucose molecules which make up the starch molecule, and then each of those glucose molecules can be absorbed into the bloodstream. Proteins are made of long chains of amino acids, of course. Pepsin in the stomach is a protease enzyme, and that breaks down those long proteins, polypeptides, into shorter chains of amino acids called peptides. Other protease enzymes later on in the digestive system, they break down those peptides into individual amino acids, which are then absorbed into the bloodstream. Fats are broken down by the enzyme lipase. You know that fats are made of glycerol and fatty acids, and all lipase does is come along, break those bonds between the fatty acids and the glycerol, and they are absorbed separately into the bloodstream. If we have a quick look at the digestive system, mechanical breakdown, of course, occurs in the mouth. When food is swallowed, it passes through the gullet into the stomach and is churned for a wee while, and digestive enzymes and hydrochloric acid is added. From the stomach, food passes into the small intestine, where digestion is completed and food is absorbed into the bloodstream there. What remains is undigestible matter and water and minerals that passes into the large intestine. The water and the minerals is absorbed from that in the large intestine as it moves around and eventually passes out through the anus. Other organs that the food passes by but does not pass through that are also involved in digestion are the liver, of course, which makes bile, which helps to emulsify fat. Bile is stored in the gallbladder until it's added to the food at the beginning of the small intestine. Pancreas makes enzymes for the digestion of all food groups, carbohydrate, proteins, and fats, and those digestive juices that help complete digestion are added at the same point as the bile from the gallbladder at the beginning of the small intestine. If we have a look at how food moves through the gut briefly, by a process of peristalsis, imagine here is your gullet, a long muscular tube, and there's some food that has been swallowed called a bolus of food. The muscles behind the bolus contract, much like squeezing toothpaste out of a tube, and that wave of contraction travels down, forcing the food along. So, if we have a look at the small intestine, this is where digestion is completed, and those small soluble food particles pass into the blood by absorption. Now, the small intestine helps out a great deal with that by having a very large surface area with little tiny finger-like projections called villi. The inner lining of the small intestine is folded anyway, but if one was to look at the surface of those folds, you would see lots of tiny little villi, increasing the surface area further. All the villi have a good blood supply to help carry all that digested food away. So if you have a look at that illustrated, here's some food particles come along, they get broken down chemically by enzymes into smaller soluble food particles, which are then absorbed and carried away by the bloodstream. Some health problems associated with diet and digestion, obesity and diabetes, of course, they may be linked with each other, and diabetes itself is the inability to control blood sugar level. Eating disorders such as anorexia nervosa and bulimia, they may be associated with certain mental health issues or history of abuse in families or low self-esteem, etc. There's a couple of ways to measure health. BMI, body mass index, which takes into account the body's mass and height and gender. And of course, body fat underneath the skin can be measured with skin fold calipers. Okay, thank you very much.